I'm Paul.
And I'm Kenny, and this is EWPK.
Wow, you're getting an early start.
Never too early when we get together, Paul.
Did you ever hear this song? It was a Broadway thing. It started out. It was from a Broadway musical, but I can't remember. It was another opening, another show.
Yeah, of course.
I don't remember what musical that is. And as I've always told people when they ask if I've ever been in a musical singing group, I say, yeah, it's called the Monotones. But I can't remember that song, but here we are with another opening and another show.
Yes, I love it, and it gets me excited every single time. We've got a great, I look a little washed out here. We've got a great show today. We've got someone amazing I'm super excited to have on who is yet again someone on Engage with Paul and Kenny who has changed this world and for the better and has made an impact. And I'm excited to have that person come to life here on the show.
Me too. Well, this is a guy. It's funny when you first told me about this gentleman a few years ago, really. I went and looked him up, and I did some research, and holy God, man, it's like wow.
No.
I mean, this isn't just this is the best way to put it. He didn't have a career; he had a life. This was a whole other level of. And look, I mean, there's a lot of really interesting. Well, I don't want to get into it now because if we do, I don't want to give it away. So
I know. I just want to say that the Warriors, many of the people in the show know that I spent a lot of time with the Warriors, and a lot of amazing people I met by being a part of the Warriors, and this was one of the more special ones. So so that's to come pretty soon.
Well, maybe we probably should just get it done, man. What are we drinking?
Yeah, I think we should get it done because he or she, whoever, has a lot of stories that I want people to hear, and I want to make sure we have enough time. So, what do you want me to go for?
Yeah.
I think I think in one of my previous shows, I might have been drinking the same thing. But there's a reason that I'm drinking this, which we'll find out later. But this is Metallica's whiskey called Blackened. I think that it is really incredible. This one, early on when they first started, I think you can see this was mastered by a master distiller. His name is Dave Pickerel.
Right.
And in fact, this bottle was actually signed by him. I was lucky enough to be a part of that part of it. Dave, I just was reading here, was considered the Johnny Appleseeder founding father of craft distilling.
Johnny
I think he was a master distiller at Whistle Pig. And why are you laughing?
Wow. No, I was laughing at somebody who actually calls someone the Johnny Appleseed.
No, I know. I should have just gone with founding father, like you, the godfather of CRM. But it is actually, I mean, Whistle Pig's incredibly well known. Metallica has been involved in a lot of. Oh yeah, Alan, Kiss Me Kate.
Thank you.
Thank you, Alan. Should have known Alan would know that. The amazing thing about this is that it's mastered and distilled with sound, and the concept around this was that the use of sound in the distilling process would enhance the distilling process and create a unique experience based on certain frequencies that would actually vibrate the liquid inside, and we would Metallica would use their specific songs that would hit that frequency and vibrate it. And then the kind of master marketing plan was to deliver the playlist, right, of the songs that helped in the distilling process as part of that, which is kind of interesting because this concept of sonic branding is starting to be really, really interesting when brands are realizing the value of creating a sonic experience as an additional way to connect with consumers, right? So, MasterCard was just voted the #1 audio brand in sonic branding. I don't have a MasterCard, but apparently if you use a MasterCard at a point of sale, it makes a unique sound. It's just like the the McDonald's I'm loving it, or Intel Inside, where you can look at sonic experiences as being part of the brand. Like what is Engage with Paul and Kenny sound? What is that? If we had a sound, what would that be like? What would or what would we taste like, Paul?
A hiss. It would sound like a hiss. I have no idea. I have
Okay.
no idea. So here's a question though on Blackened.
Mm-hmm.
So somebody chose frequencies. And I assume they chose the frequencies. They didn't just, or did they just go to
No, by science. So everything was done by science. So the frequencies were defined based on which frequencies actually moved the liquid.
So if somebody used different frequencies on the liquid or a liquid, would it taste different?
I think it probably wouldn't make much of a difference because it wouldn't actually change in the distilling process. It wouldn't actually create vibrations and move it. It would just pass. I don't know. Those are some good questions we can ask later to people who know more than I do about this. What are you drinking, Paul?
Well, I am drinking Don Q Gran Puerto Rican rum, and this has stories associated with it too. So this is, well, of course, this is the bottle. But the bottle has a story because it was a gift from Jesus Hoyos, who we all know.
To you?
Jesus is, yes, several years ago when he and his wife Cynthia dropped by. Jesus, born and raised in Puerto Rico, lives in Miami, probably the leading LATAM influencer and analyst and thought leader in the customer facing space in that venue and or in that geography. And he really is a evangelist for these rums. What's it called? Diplomatico is another Puerto Rican rum that also he pushes. This thing he gave me, absolutely delicious. It's interesting. What makes the rum itself interesting, although there's another reason for this story. What makes the rum itself interesting is only 40 proof. 80 proof.
Yeah.
But it tastes like it's 120 proof. It's just huge for that level of alcohol. I mean, it's absolutely huge taste. And again, it's rum, so it's going to give you that kind of, I think Puerto Rican rum is, don't hold me to this. It's either a little more on the cane sugar side, I think, than.
I think it is. When I was in Puerto Rico, that's what they were telling me.
Yes, and so it tastes like a cane sugar rum versus a molasses, you know, based rum. Now the other reason is the glass. Now I'm covering up the part I want to show, which is that.
Oh my gosh.
Yes,
Yes.
this is
In New York.
one. You know, yeah, I know that people who see our intro always see it says live from New York, and they actually think, oh, they're in New York, and the reality is it's only live from New York in my head, right? I mean, that's it. Let's face it.
Is that what they
I'm always in New York. Well, no, people actually thought it was in New York. Obviously, they also got the SNL reference too.
Yeah.
But being such a diehard Yankees fan, and this glass was given to me by a buddy of ours, a set of glasses, Scott Jeffer, who of course works for the Yankees, right?
Sure.
So, and right now the Yankees are on such a good roll. I thought it was time to toast the team, right? So that's why that.
Wow. Excellent. And nice pick. I like that. That makes me want to try that, which
Well, anytime, man. Come on
yeah.
over.
Okay. Thank you. And yeah, toast to you. Very nice.
So what's cooking now otherwise? I mean, anything on your mind you want to chat
You
about?
know, I had a wonderful experience. I was out in Chicago for a day. In fact, that's when I was hoping to see you, but that didn't happen. So I was sad about that. But Joe Pine and Jim Gilmore, who wrote The Experience Economy,
Oh yeah.
was having a 20-year anniversary, and I was
Wow.
invited to attend a very small group um, of others that are passionate about the way they would be fun to have on this show too, because they actually changed a lot of how we thought about experience and the
They sure
economy of
did.
experiences. I actually was certified back. It was one of the second group that had been certified in being an experienced economist. Um, but it was really nice to talk about experiences, to think about, to be surrounded by experienced people and those that I could learn from and I could challenge. And it's always fun to be in Chicago. So I got to spend time with Jim Gilmore and Joe Pine, who is iconic, and a lot of other people. I even met the guy who created the T-shirt gun that we use, or the the little thing that flips up to be like
Yeah.
a basket that they wear on your shoulder. So this guy created it. He's a magician. He's a phenomenal guy, and a lot of other really interesting characters. So it was
So
really a nice time. Time
one
well spent.
little fact about Joe, diehard Yankees fan.
Yes, yes, he is.
Diehard. That's how he and I act. I mean, we got together first time I met him, long after you met him, but first time I met him, it was because I had written Serum at the Speed of Light. He contacted me about it, and of course I had already read his book. I mean, The Experience Economy is one of my early Bibles, really, and the second edition in 2011, I read that when it came out. Although I met him by that time. And then we started to, and he was, he lives in what, St. Paul, Minneapolis, right? Unless
Yeah.
he's moved. But then he told me he was a Yankees fan, and that was it, man. Lifelong friends from that day on. I mean, it was just
I told him
had
you
to
said
be.
hi, and also this is
Okay.
the we got the original. They gave us the original printing of their book.
No kidding.
Yeah, which was called "Gods and Services Are No Longer Enough," and I mean goods and services, gods. And services.
I got you.
Yeah, goods and services. But the interesting thing is this whole thing was based on concept of experience on as a stage, right? And and also what makes me laugh is if you look at this, look how young they were.
Oh my goodness. Oh my God.
It's a good thing we still stay young, Paul. But anyway, it was nice. It was nice to get the book and just to be a part. And I know Joe real well. So
Well, I mean, I again, look, you to me are the greatest, uh, let's say, experiential design person I've ever met.
thank you.
Joe is probably the greatest. What do I call him? framework guy, the theoretician, so to speak.
Yeah,
But he's
yeah.
a framework guy. He, when just the
He's a
idea of
2 by 2 matrix guy.
well, yeah, right, right, exactly. Between the two of you, oh my God, you guys, why don't the two of you just form a company?
Well, it's funny. I remember before he wrote Infinite Possibilities, he was sketching his ideas down on a napkin, and I was just in awe of how he was thinking. And then I was able to take that time, space, and matter XYZ axis and help to kind of bring it into the kind of sports realm and stuff. So, I have a great deal of respect. I also have I'm no shame in using other people's brilliance to impact behavior change, like BJ Fogg's work or Joe Pine's work or your work. In fact, I have your book right here, The Commonwealth of Self-Interest, right
Yeah,
there.
the newest one. That was the last business book I will
I know that's a great
ever
book.
write. Yeah. I'll tell you, I'm one of those people that doesn't love my own books. I'm happy I wrote them. I'm happy they did well, but at the same time, I've never really loved them.
How many editions of CRM at the Speed of Light were there?
I was in 4 editions, 9 languages.
Wow.
Yeah, it did well. I mean, it was, look, ultimately, it did what I needed it to do. I wanted to make sure there was a giant handbook, so to
Right.
speak, so that people had something they could look at. They didn't have to read the book end to end, although people did. Because, ultimately, the last edition was, if you count the digital only chapters, was 850 pages. It was a
Wow.
big book. Um, took me 10 months to write. Funny, Commonwealth of Self-Interest took me 2.5 years to write, and it was only half that size.
I was just talking to Brian Solis, our friend Brian
Mm.
Solis, and he says, that, or I think he was telling me that, these publishers now, they want smaller, they don't want big books anymore
No,
because people don't have time to read them, or they're just too intimidating, right?
no, they want to hear and see things. That's what they want. I mean, they don't. It's a stop. Look, I'm 74, so obviously I love reading, and I always will love reading. And I grew up reading. That's what I grew up doing. And at the same time, I get it. Um, I don't. So many people attribute it to ADHD or ADD. I don't. It's
Oh,
just
I don't. Yeah.
nah. The world changed, right? And because the world changed, how people choose to consume their content is the way they choose to consume their content. It doesn't make them. Um, they don't have a medical issue, and that's why they do this. It's just the way the world has evolved. That's the way they retain enjoy the most and retain the most.
It's funny because it's so funny. People used to joke with me because I was early in Audible. I was doing Audible like in the early 2000s, and now I'm still listening, and people are like, "That's." I remember there was a stage when people were like, "That's cheating. That's not really reading. That's cheating." I'm like, "Well, the way I want to consume content is really up to me. I think it's not a matter of cheating or something."
No,
But it
no,
cracks me up. This is the same I told you the same conversation I had with Mark Cuban. Mark's like, I don't think anybody should be using phones at a game. They should be watching the stars on stage, on the court. And I'm like, I think that if people want to use their phones and that's what creates the best experience while they're there, then I want to enable them to do that. And I still believe that. Like,
and you're right.
yeah,
You're
I
right.
am.
Look, I mean, look, unless for whatever reason there is a form of communication or of, uh, you know, uh, a type of experience that disturbs the experiences of others severely,
Right.
you just do what you can do to accommodate the way people want to consume. That's all.
Like
I,
playing your iPad on an airplane without headphones.
yeah,
That
that's disturbing.
That's disturbing. That I would agree with Mark.
Yeah,
That's
absolutely.
all right. Should we
Yeah,
go to
Uber didn't get us we got to go to the other studio so we can set up for our guests.
I
So
know.
last time Uber didn't get us there too fast. So I just saw this thing that the University of Western Florida, they finally stabilized a hypersonic engine.
Oh, good.
And that runs about 1,550 miles an hour, something like that.
It's
And
convenient.
it can actually get you um, from LA to Australia in 2 hours. So what I asked them to do so we could get to the damn other studio on time was to create an airplane for us with a hypersonic engine. So it's
You're
parked
always thinking
outside.
about how to improve the show.
Well, Uber didn't do it. Let's face it. So
Yeah.
I got
Okay.
them to do this hypersonic engine. We have a hypersonic jet outside. Just have to get on. The pilot's ready, and we can get over there. So let's go
Do I
play
have
our.
one?
Well, no, we both just get on the jet.
Oh, yeah, right. Yeah.
That's right. That's all. We don't,
Okay. All right.
Well,
Let's
no,
go do that.
actually, I'll bring it to you. It'll take about
Well, right. Take a second. I'll just wait outside.
3 or 4 seconds, right? So I'll
Okay.
go get it. I'll bring it over. In the meantime, let's do our segment intro, and we should be there by the time this is over.
All right.
See you in a
Okay.
couple.
I'll look for you on the plane.
See how fast that was? I want to show you. It did have one bad side effect. I used to have a full head of hair.
Mm-hmm. Hey, it's worth it. You know what? It's called sacrifice for our viewers.
That's right. I'm happy to have done it. So, who's our guest, man?
Okay, so I am going to talk just a little bit about this guest, and then maybe read a little. But we have got a true legend in the world of sound joining us tonight, Paul. He has revolutionized the way we experience sound, and he started this very early in his life. Then he met his co-founder and then wife Helen Meyer, and through their company has transformed the way people and experiences have experienced sound through science, through scientific invention and quality engineering. He has dedicated his career, in my opinion, to pushing the boundaries of what audio technology is like, and delivering this kind of unparalleled experience, and one that truly changes ultimately in the consumer, for the person who has the benefit of feeling the sound that John and Helen at Meyer Sound has created. It truly changes their behavior. It's the epitome of what I would call a transformational experience, where you feel different after that. Now, just a little bit of background, just some flaring. So John has not only the passion for creating unforgettable experiences, but the impact that he has had on the world has earned him a spot in the TEC Awards Hall of Fame, alongside icons like Frank Zappa and Phil Spector. And he was originally tapped by Steve Miller back in 1967 to develop a better sound system for the Rockers Monterey Pop Performance. Wow. And that is, to some degree, what kicked this off. And then Jefferson Starship reached out to them. Francis Ford Coppola reached out to them for the screening of Apocalypse Now. And you may have heard some of the bands that travel with John's equipment. Metallica, heard of them? Ed Sheeran, U2, Pearl Jam. I mean, it goes on and on and on. Rod Stewart, the Grateful Dead, Bruno Mars. If you've seen Cirque du Soleil, especially in Las Vegas, you've probably experienced their sound. And they're, if you've ever been to their studio in Berkeley, California, you see what kind of family environment they've created there. So without any more ado, let's bring into the studio the master and the genius and someone who I consider family and a friend, John Meyer.
Hello. Thank you for that.
I was wondering what you were going to say to that intro. I'm sorry.
So John, welcome.
Well, it's glad to be here.
You know, John, when you and Helen first walked into the Warriors front office, I think people were like, "Who are these guys? You know, what are they doing for us?" And what you guys created for us, was literally my first experience with you, which was changing the way fans experience sound in an NBA arena, and everyone from the CTO of the NBA on down was excited because it's the first time in history, in recent history, that someone was thinking of changing the way a fan could see the game. And what I mean by see the game is they could close their eyes and hear what was happening on the court, even if you were on the second level in the back. And from that moment, when I got to work with you and your team and everything, I knew that there was something special with not only who you were, but what you created in Meyer Sound. Over how many years now have you?
Well, we started the company in, I guess, 79. So
79, Berkeley, California.
45 years.
And Paul and I have been wanting to have you on the show for quite a while. So thank you for taking the time.
I honestly, I got so many questions for you. I really do. So I just want to start with sort of I don't know, called the most standard one, really, which was in the course of learning how to do all this stuff, one of the things that I always hear from people, sound professionals, sometimes other people who are just actively, involved in the technology side, is sound's more important than the video is. If you're going to get one thing right, get the sound right. And literally, that's universal. I don't think I've ever heard anyone say, no, don't worry about the sound too much, video. Why do people say that?
Well, Lucas also said it. He said that right away. He said sound and visuals are equally important. They do different things. Sound it carries emotion in a way that's very difficult to describe or understand exactly how that works. But we know it from experience. A lot of audio is kind of like cooking. Like we use science and chemistry. Like if we were cooking, we'd use chemistry to make sure that. But chemistry won't tell you what we came up with the other day. It's like why New York bagels taste better than the ones we make in California.
Okay.
I mean,
I'm with you, by the way.
And what's interesting about that is that if you grew up on California bagels, you don't even believe that till you go to New York. And then you realize in an instant, how's that happen? What's going on here? And then there have been documentaries recently showing this one guy that makes 30,000 a week, whatever, and it's really in how he treats the yeast as alive and people, it's just sound is, and even as a kid, I grew up in this industry. My uncle was doing sound for Fantasia. And so I could go down and watch. By the time I got down there, it was like in the late 50s, which the Mouseketeers were going in, and Disney it was opening their theme parks and stuff like that. And but if you look back at Fantasia, Fantasia was an amazing piece of work in terms of, there's a manual about 100 pages long and how to set up the theaters for Fantasia. And they had pan pots and really, really a lot of technology was developed by Disney. They were they kind of held that as a legacy. But what's becomes hard is to figure out how do people hear? That's the big question. Like when we're trying to figure out, we don't have a really good model of how we hear. You know, we have ideas, but like we know recently that the part of the brain that does vision shapes, if you close your eyes, they can show you that the audio will move in that area very quickly, but vision will kick it back out as soon as you open your eyes. So there's a lot of gives you hints that, you know, sound is like, it's like being created in the brain. It's not like a microphone you know, sending information to the end of this thing. It's much more the brain tries to figure out from the clues it gets what's going on. So that's why when you show someone that has more information, they hear it right away, because the brain goes, oh, okay, just like we do with the bagel. We don't have to think about it. It's like, it's better. And one of the things that we've been really looking at is how universal is that? And one of the questions came up, you know, like when we had, you know, as we do stereo and we mix these different kinds of things, you know, albums and or even live or however we're doing it, is the positions and all this kind of stuff, is this everyone hear it the same way, or do people hear it differently? That was a question. And going through the history, doesn't look like this experiment was ever really done. So several years ago, we decided to start a project called the Blue Horn Project, because we painted the blue horn blue to make sure that we didn't get mixed up with other stuff, and make a really state-of-the-art system. In other words, using everything we knew, and then setting it up in a studio. And we'd have people come in listening just to records or just information off the internet, and we would play something, and then we had someone that would say, well, where did you hear the people? Where are they positioned? So we wanted to find out how universal this was. I mean, mixers go to a lot of trouble to create a sonic scene. We're trying to figure out, is this universal or is this just for him? And when we come in, but it turned out even simple recordings that were done with simple microphones, like one of this, a social club, creates like a pattern in the room where things are. Everyone we play it to hears it that way. So that was really good news, because it means that it's very universal. I mean, we haven't had anybody say, well, I think he's over there and he's over there. And that's a long, complicated experiment to get to the point of, so that the speakers, if you don't make the speakers, like if you have anything like that isn't quite right, then the speaker gives itself away and you can tell it's coming from the speaker. So we try to eliminate all the clues that would tell you it's a recording, it's a system. And so that kind of started out very young. I think my first question was, how do people hear, do we have to have different speakers for different kinds of language? And one of the popular ideas in the 70s, 60s, when I was in a hi-fi store working in different parts of this industry, is that people would say, we should have a speaker for jazz, maybe another one for a violin, another one for a piano. And the question is can't we just have one? I mean, we're looking at this monitor in front of us. We don't have to have different ones if we have people or buildings and
for visual.
Yeah. So the idea, it didn't, even early on as a kid, I kept wondering, why are they saying this? I mean, it seems to me that we should be able to build one speaker that can, what could that be? That would be play everything like a sitar. I mean, a sitar has like a lot of notes between. Piano is pretty easy; it has 12 notes per octave, but a sitar has like something like 60 notes per octave. So if a speaker only had 12 notes per octave, you couldn't play a sitar. But my argument was, if we had a speaker that could do the sitar, it could also do the piano. So I started on that path to develop speakers. The first one that really took off was the HD1, where we actually built it as a microphone tester, so that when we went in the field testing, we'd have some place to test the microphone. But the industry, Roger Nichols was the first one that came in and was listening to music on it. And he goes, oh, we've got to have these. And that's kind of what got us into more of the music business than the kind of theoretical world we were in.
But do you think if that wouldn't have, if that wouldn't have happened, do you think you would have found yourself still in that? Or like, how much of a path changer was that?
It was huge, because we weren't even thinking about it. I felt like studio monitors were pretty much, you know, it was kind of a fixed industry. It's like breaking into building jet engines or something. It's like, you know, it's like everyone had their different ones, and, you know, no one seemed very open to this idea, you know, of like building a speaker that could play any kind of instrument. You know, people had their favorite speakers, and it was either JBL or Western, different, you know, whatever it was. And so when we built the HD1, which was a full range, and we corrected the phase, and it was a complicated system. It had 50 stages of electronics inside, doing, you know, phase correction and things like that. It's about the limit in analog, because otherwise it starts to get unstable. So we put everything we could in to that point. And when Roger came in and listened to it, I didn't invite Roger. Someone in the tech group had him say, you should come by and listen to John's new speaker. But I said, well, I only have one right now. You're welcome to listen to it. And he listened to it. He said, oh, this is amazing. He said, are you going to make them? I said, well, we're just building them for microphone testing. He says, why'd you show it to me? I go, you're right. I probably shouldn't have shown it to you. You know, I don't plan to make these for just listen. You can't. Can I hear it too? And I go, well, yeah, probably. You know, I mean, you know, what do you want? He said, I want to hear this in stereo so I can listen to my records. So we set that up. You know, I've been around. When you grow up in this industry, you generally do whatever the producers, directors, or stars want, because it's really their world. If they don't like you, they can push you out of the thing, and they will, because everything is for them, and they are the stars. I mean, and so if you feel like, well, you know, it's just easier to support them than not. And so we set it up. He says, okay, I want to do an album with these. I said, I don't even know if they'll make it to LA. I mean, this is a prototype. It's got a whole rack of gear for each one. I mean, you know, and this went on for like arguing for 3 days. And finally I said, fine, I'll send an engineer with him. You can go. He said, I'll do an AES show. We'll do a playback. We'll do a multi-mix down at the AES show. And we'll do the final mix down there for Ricky Lee Jones. And we'll have albums so and she was going to sign them. I'm like, huh? Fine, you win. You know, and we did that AES show, and we sold hundreds of these things, and we had no idea how we were going to make them. We were planning on building maybe 10, you know. And so I go, oh my God. And like he says, you can't show us something like this, John, and not make it. And I go, oh, yeah, you're right. That was dumb.
Wow.
And so it kind of all of a sudden put us in a position of how are we going to do this? And we had, and we're used to the PA world, which is, it was I mean, I grew up in movies, and I didn't know much about the studio monitor business, or, you know, we didn't have any connections, but we didn't seem to need, because they were going to buy this thing anyway and just put them on their console. And then we did a whole marketing thing. We got someone in, they designed the box. We put some controls on it, and we had so much power into it, we could do equalization. So we had a little light in the front, which was a red-green LED to warn you if you were overloading the speaker. So you can see right away you're pushing it too hard. And we had our Japanese distributor develop, we could talk through also at high frequency, radio frequency, we could talk through the LED to set filters inside. We had a ton of filters in this thing. And so we put all these volume VCAs in there, which would control these filters. And so we had like a ton of filters, 20 filters or things, so we could EQ the console balance. And they came back, Walter Becker, and they said, you know, we really don't want you to do that. I said, we're really done. We got all this, and I'm showing this remote control. He says, you know, we're really worried that, you know, we've been working on a mix and something sounds wrong. This doesn't work. Something's wrong. And he says, we go, look, where's that remote control? They're scrambling through the drawers. Where did they leave it? He says, and then we find out someone dinked with it and changed it. He says, you know, we spent a whole day and we knew something was wrong. He says, we don't want any possibility that could happen. I go, okay. Paul and I look at each other. We'll just rip those VCAs out then. I mean, there's no point to put them on if we're not going to use them, and they create noise. And so we kind of like built the HD. And they say they wanted to look just like the ones we had in our chamber. They didn't want anything marketing worked with or any design group. They just wanted that one speaker you do in your chamber, and we'd take them. And we set up a whole kind of small little chamber thing so we could measure them so everyone would be the same. And that kind of launched us into two things: a powered speaker and a precision one that they would all be identical, so we didn't have to match stereo pairs, which was just kind of a nightmare of, if you think about it, trying to figure out how to repair a stereo pair. So if we made everyone the same, they could just replace it. So it changed. It was a huge paradigm shift for the company in terms of how to that people. It's just really kind of hard to describe exactly what it just was. It just put us into, we wanted to make everything sound like the HD1 after that, so it influenced everything.
Yeah, right.
So
yeah, I think with any company, like there's moments, right? There's just moments that create a trajectory that maybe wouldn't have existed without that happening, that whole experience. So
we were already doing stuff with the Grateful Dead. I was involved with Wall of Sound and things like that. So we were already plenty distracted. So, but that wasn't we knew that was too massive to trucker. I mean, it took 10 days to set up in New York, cost more money. They they spent more money setting it up than they earned. It's just 10 days in New York is really expensive.
Yeah.
We got 3 unions and it's endless, things like that. Where I started thinking we need to make lightweight, compact things. I started working with the Grateful Dead on that too, making speakers that were easy to set up, quick to set up, and we could hang them rather than stack them on the stage to the ceiling and stuff. So we started working on, but based on that, they bought HD1s. They bought things, so that's what they want us to sound like. So you can't really go back.
Right. Yeah.
You just can't. It's just this is going to be the trajectory. We don't know. We don't have any business. We're not business people, so we don't think about was this a good idea?
So were you getting requests later on from, because obviously the HD1, I mean, people clearly loved it, and then at the same time you're dealing with dozens of other artists who all have their own idea of what sound should sound like. How did you deal with that?
Well, we did get requests from the cinema people to make a version for cinema. And I go, what would that be? And they go, well, we'd want to have maybe the mid-range suppressed or something like that. And I go, well, we'll call it a HDC then. He said, oh, no, we don't want you to change the name. The HD1 I said, I can't make a speaker that has a different frequency response without warning people. We've already been through this with Roger Nichols and stuff. They all want to be the same. And so this is I thought I'd rather not make them for cinema than if you want to. I'm pretty. We got HTC. How about that? How about we just compromise? Because then
why would cinema care?
That's what I was just thinking.
Why would they care what the name? Like, did it have so much of an equity, that name, that became important?
I don't know. This was all pushed early on with Skywalker and stuff like that. And I said we I didn't know. I don't generally ask because it's not going to. You can sense it's not going to go well. And they're doing. They're kind of the founders of THX and all this kind of stuff. So I didn't want to get in. I didn't want to go there. So I just said we really don't want to make a cinema speaker right now. We're kind of bogged down with what we're doing. And then I think at the show, we were showing the HD1, and we just won the R&D 100 award. I don't know if most people don't know what an R&D 100 award is, but we're the first ones to not figure out, but one of the problems that all the scientific community was saying, consultants and acousticians, Bolt, Bernick, and Newman, is that wouldn't it be nice if we could use music for a test signal so we didn't have to kill everybody with noise? And so this was early in the 70s. And this led to the idea that I had a really good engineer, digital guy, which I wanted to kind of we had a chance to go to Switzerland with a lot of money they wanted to create music with classical, record and play back classical music for supplement it, so that if you had a small concert, say only had 30 instruments, you would be able to play the major works by using digital and Buchla came in so we could make one violin sound like 7 violins. So we set up a whole thing in Switzerland, and the first question was I was asking why the speakers transfer function, we call it, but the transfer function, like if you have a lemon and you don't know, say you're blindfolded, you don't know what it is, chemistry we'd take it apart and look at it and say, okay, this is a lemon and it's sour. And it took us all day to figure this out, but it's still sour. So the transfer function just says this is a state. It doesn't have to be done instantly. The tongue's pretty quick. It can tell with the trillions of neurons at the other end of the tongue that it's sour much quicker than we could with chemistry. But it doesn't really matter that. And so my argument is that if music has the notes, we can build the transfer function one note at a time, can't we? We already agreed on that. So we could play each note and then solve it so we can see that. So why can't we use music? And if we get a hit of a note, then we'll store it and show it. So the screen would start to fill up with this information over time. I mean, that to me seems what computers would be really good for, is they can remember this, display it. We don't have to display anything if we don't know what it is. So you can kind of see, if you were doing a tweeter, you'd see that and stuff like that. And so I got agreement with, I can't do that. I can't program. So I have to get there to buy in on this thing. So I'm good at creating ideas. Why can't, if it's just a state, if we're trying to figure out if it's a lemon or an orange or something like that, and we have all day to do it, why do we, it doesn't have to be done. And the music, they'll keep playing notes, which is sooner or later we'll get two of the same ones. We can confirm we got two notes play. So we'll show that and things like that. And so we developed SIM and we presented a paper at the AES actually it came out then we made a phone call. There was a thing in the newspaper about Los Alamos was working on how to detect salmonella in eggs. And they said something about it would be, ultimately with music. So we called down and say, well, we have an analyzer that could do that. It was taking them 8 hours to get the trace, because salmonella, when it's in an egg and it grows, you get a little tiny spike, very little tiny spike. So it takes like hours when you're running a sweep tone through here to get it. So I said, but we could do this, probably in less than a minute, with our analyzer. We have a prototype of it. So we went down to Los Alamos. We took it with us, and they had this set up with the egg, and we did it with noise at that time because that's what they had, and we figured out the thing right away. And they said you should go for an R&D 100. Well, I didn't know what that is. I mean, I feel like an idiot. Like they have a whole wall of them. They showed us R&D 100. So there are significant research things that are done, and there's a magazine that reviews 10,000 entries, and they choose 100 each year, and mostly it's labs go after it. And I go, well, what lab would we need an endorsement? We'll endorse you, they said, because what you did here is really interesting and significant. No one's done this yet. And I said, well, how much time do we have? He said, 2 weeks. I said, we have to write up a thing in 2 weeks. He says, we'll send you the paper. They'll send you all the stuff. And yeah, you have to submit in 2 weeks. That's when it's coming up. So it was a rough 2 weeks, and we have to publish it. They go, oh, by the way, you have to get it published before 2 weeks. So I called the AES. And I know a lot of people, I said, you wouldn't have a chance we'd get a paper in, could you? And they go, someone just quit 10 minutes ago. You can have their spot. So we have the publish.
To be.
I know. It's just right on the edge. It's like, it drives my son crazy that our industry is like this. If you're in the right door at the right time, it's golden. Like they found the chicken laying, or the turkey, or whatever it is, lays golden eggs. But anyway, so we submitted and we won. And we won the R&D 100. So, and I like that because I didn't want this to be a Meyer thing. I want the industry to use it. And one of the disadvantages of doing things with R&D 100, you have to send all the information to them, to their scientists, so they can review to see if this is really unique and not just some kind of trick, which means that you lose your, right. Have it as a trade secret or a patent or anything, you have to publish it. And I said, it's worth it because it'll be more important that we have a really nice tool out there for our audio trade that could use music than it is to try and, if we try to sell it, they'll say it just makes Meyer stuff look good. I mean, and so that it kind of weaves together. So that kind of put us on the map for the technical community, scientific community, that we were serious about this. We were really trying to build tools that would advance, because now we can, instead of using noise when we're in the Grateful Dead and blasting the empty room, no one will let us blast it full of with an audience, but we could play music and capture it with this machine SIM and see how the audience change the space. So that kind of weaves through how these things kind of tie together, and it's because information is where you find it. That's what people don't understand. It's like, and we're better off as engineers. See, we don't have to have an explanation. We're not stuck. The physics people always have to, they want to know why light does what it's doing. You put it through a filter and put it through another filter and disappears, put another one and comes back again. I mean, they're struggling with really serious, hard problems. But see, as engineers, all we have to know is we throw fuel off the end of this rocket and it goes up in the air. And we're just making, we don't really care how, we're not as near as interested in exactly why does it go up in the air. They're real interested in gravity, and gravity, according to Einstein, is not a force. It's like going up or down in an elevator. See, that's not very interesting to engineers. We know we have to deal with things being sucked to earth hard, and we have to use a lot of energy to go up in the air. I mean, what do they use? 2 million pounds of fuel in the 2 minutes, a million pounds of fuel a minute to get that thing up, and that's what engineers will do. I mean, is it elegant? I mean, NASA one time asked me, we make speakers for NASA for testing the 2 minutes, so they put high powered short run speakers, they can put it in for vibration. And they said, don't you have something more elegant? I said, and I felt like saying, you mean that thing outside more elegant?
Yeah, to match that thing outside that you put together.
I held my tongue and I said, what do you mean by elegant? I mean, we use a lot of power to do. I mean, we'd like to, I mean, speakers are only about 5% efficient. So we'd like to get that up. We can get about 10%, but we throw a lot of power away because it's not a big problem. And we use like maybe 250,000 watts in a stadium, but they got millions of watts for their lights. So no one cares, so there are ways to make it more efficient, but it gets really expensive, and it's hard enough to get people to pay for what we're doing right now, let alone add 10 times to the cost, like they're just, unless it's something that they experience that'll be different, they're not going to, no one wants to pay money to just reduce things, into, I mean, we try, I mean, we all the time, I think every product we make is a little bit lighter than the last one. We keep refining it, but it's like cars. I mean, how much progress have we made with the V8 engine? I mean, Mercedes and BMW promised every year to get rid of it, but I don't see that they have, because American likes V8. Even Ferrari made a V8, which blew everybody's mind on the planet, because Ferrari said he'd never make a V8. Yeah. So why did he make the California? Because Americans won't buy a 6. They just won't. They don't like 6s. I don't know why. I mean, I love 6s. It's a brilliant little engine. All the aircraft had 6s.
So
I think. Oh, go ahead, Paul.
Well, so here's the thing. So this morning, I did a different show, and on the show, I had this guy, Steve Gilmore, who Kenny knows, and Steve Gilmore in his youth, one of his claims to fame is he literally had the second podcast in the history of podcasts, which is still ongoing, right, as a live stream now. But in his youth, he was basically a producer for everything ranging from Fireside Theater to Paul Butterfield, right? And we were talking about Paul Butterfield as one of my, young icon. I had loved Paul Butterfield, and East West was my favorite album. And, and he was mentioning in the course of that one of the things Butterfield liked doing was not just the science of the technology being used, but the art of it. So, for example, one of the things he described was how the band deliberately played in a circle, and at the same time they had speakers set up, and they had their guitars, and they would sometimes flip the guitar and use it as a drum. Other times they would deliberately drive the guitars so that it would feed back somewhat with the speakers. I mean, but they were kind of playing at the same time, trying to experiment with how to utilize sound in, interesting at least, and, I guess hopefully unique ways that would help give them a signature as a band. And as an engineer, though, how do you think about those things?
Well, I mean, it's a good point. One of the things that one of the things early on when Pepperland opened and had our quad system in there, it was 69. We built a system for Pepperland in San Rafael, and everybody, Zappa came, one of the first bands that came, and it was basically from my hi-fi experience. It's all big horns and things, like 8-foot horns and low-foot horns, but it's all bi-amped and things. It was really pretty. It made a lot of press because everything else was not like that. We were the only probably biamp quad system on the planet at that time. So the Who came, a lot of people came, just to play there. And when Frank was there and he was sitting on the tape looking in front of the stage, he looked miserable. And I go, what's wrong? He goes, it's way too clean. He said, we're not going to be able to do our show. I mean, this thing is like a hi-fi system. I go, what do you like? And he says, well, we have a little hotel system that we have, and it's really great. It's not powerful enough for this room. And I said, just bring it. I'll mic it. I don't care. And so he did. He was so happy. He jumped right up and go, come on, go to the hotel, get our stuff. I mean, I don't want to, because they had that, there'd be impossible. Steve Miller used to say, can you make a mic sound like a crystal microphone that's dying? I go, I don't know. Just buy 100 of them. I mean, they cost. I mean, they don't cost anything. Just buy a ton of them. I don't want to spend my life trying to duplicate a spit-filled crystal microphone dying as you blow hard into it. I mean, it might be possible, might not be possible.
God, that is fascinating.
A ton of them, he did. I mean, it's like, I'd rather work on, get your sound when you want, and I'll transmit it to the whole rest of the audience. And there was my whole philosophy. It's like the Grateful Dead, Bear Stanley, he says, I want each instrument to come from its location. I want Phil to sound like it's coming from Phil. I want the vocals to coming from the center. And I go, yeah, okay, that makes sense. I said, but right now you're killing everybody because you got the whole wall of sound, and the band is complaining because you're trying to do bigger rooms now. As you do bigger rooms, it gets louder, louder, louder. Why don't we let me use some of my technology and I'll just delay some speakers and still keep the image that you want? In other words, I can delay a speaker. No one knew what delay lines are in the 70s, but Gotham was making them. There were people making them for the recording market. I knew they existed. They cost $10,000 each, I mean, but the Dead had money. I mean, I generally don't squawk about money until someone starts to say they have no budget. So either they have a budget or they have no budget. And either way, it doesn't change anything, So we started experimenting with how to keep their image, what they want, and delayed the speakers in the room and stuff so that we keep the image. I mean, that's what digital is really good for, is doing complicated things. And I think the whole immersive sound that we're kind of exploring is going back to the Blue Horn project, one of the problems is we don't have any electronic way of doing what a mixer does. There's no solution for that. What they do, they fool around, they add filters, they add all these plug-in things until they get the sound where they want it. Now, we don't have a way of doing that with an electronic device. It's like the harmonica you're blowing into, or whatever. But so I've been saying, I think you might have to train people. It might have to be done by apprenticeship. It may not be possible. We may not find a solution quickly to this problem and find some mechanism, some computer program that can do this. I mean, like a little Leslie that whirls around, that's really hard to do electronically and have it sound the same way a Leslie does. I mean, you wind up dragging Leslies on the stage because you can't get that sound of a turning horn, that Doppler shift. It was a very complex problem. It could take a ton of effort for something you can just use. It's already exists. And that's not it wouldn't help to make it electronic there. What would be interesting is how to convey it to the audience. How can we pick that thing up with multiple microphones and then have a lot of speakers in the room and convey it, rather than trying to duplicate the sonic. See, it's like a violin. It'd be hard to create an artificial synthetic violin. It's hard. Where like we can just mic the things that they've been using for hundreds of years. And we did that in Switzerland. We got all kinds of different violins in the lab. Stradivari, we had a whole collection of Stradivari there because I was curious, why do people spend millions of dollars on this thing? The first thing they came, I have my way. I generally get what I want. And finally they arrive, and they're all in plexiglass boxes. And I go, you got to take them out. And they go, you know what those things are worth? I said, they're not worth anything if they're in glass boxes. You got to take them out. Well, I have people here that can play that are and I want to see what they sound like compared to a student violin and these other violins. And it's interesting close up. They're rather bright and they're not even very pleasant. But you get 50 feet away, it's the only thing you can hear. And all the students disappear in the orchestra. You go, oh, of course. They were making it so that they could project. And the musician is the sacrifice for this. So, that violin is so complex. We had a physicist in Switzerland that measured there in a violin, there's a post that offsets the F hole. and so that post is there so it will rock like billows to get more energy out of this thing. But what the question is that did Stradivarius did they compensate for the weight of that post by making it thinner or thicker, and like that? So he probed the whole thing with a phono cartridge with a feather in the end, and looked at the whole violin. And he compensated that post. They removed just enough wood so that the post, so it was balanced, so that it would. I mean, and I've had violin makers get mad at me saying that's ridiculously complicated for nothing. But like that, he did it anyway. And it's hard to. It gives. I don't know why he did it. I mean, we don't have the tools to. And no one will let me add the wood back to see if we can. I mean, they don't even want you to touch it. I mean,
yeah.
I mean, they're worth millions of dollars, and people that have them love them. And
Yeah.
My whole dream was to see if we could pick something up and play it back and have it sound like it. A-B. In other words, all the work we did in Switzerland was all A-B. Have a violin, the Strad, and we play it back through speakers and try to see and ask people which does it sound the same. We do the same thing now, like when we have to build a new driver or materials disappearing, or it's getting too expensive, or can we, diamond right now is considered a really neat thing to make speakers out of. Diamond is expensive.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it is, you can grow it. It's really expensive. You can try to grind it into a little dome, which costs thousands and thousands of dollars. Nothing grinds diamond except diamond, so that we say, well, and right now we're using a silk tweeter like in the HD1. So the question is can we find something to substitute that sounds like this and not be insanely expensive? So we set up a test, like we have X speaker behind a screen, there'll be X and there'll be A and B. So one of those A and B is like X. X is the one we want it to become. A and B is like, so we're trying to get people to see, or X is the target, and then we have people, have a little thing, press A and B. But every time they do things, the A and B may switch, so you won't give you. So it's done scientifically, and then we kind of see if people can detect anything that would, because you have to understand, just to give you an idea of a speaker, why I say they're kind of expensive is right now it's kind of like a train, like your car. If you're driving your car and you have your foot on the gas, but if you take the foot off the gas, you coast. Well, if you step on the brake hard and then overpower with the gas and leave your foot on the brake and then take off the gas, it stops instantly. Now, it's very wasteful. It takes a lot of power to do that. I mean, we use for the new subwoofer 15,000 watts to get this so that we can, so it responds so we can control this mass. So that's why I say it's, trying to find ways to reverse like in steam trains, they used to, instead of putting on the brakes, they'd put them in reverse, which is kind of hard on everything. And that's one way of stopping it, and run the wheels backwards. You get more friction than if you just slam on the brakes. So that's another way. But in our speaker world, that would be like we'd have to reverse it and put reverse energy in there.
Like the reverse engines on an airplane when you land, right?
Yeah. But we have to do it at the same time.
Yeah.
We have things.
Right.
Yeah. So the problem is insanely, it's not even, and it's unmodelable. We can't model it. I mean, we work with programs already that cost, they're talking about, we're working with math institutions and things like that. Can we model this so that we can figure out what's really going on here in this simple little thing with a voice coil and a magnet and cone and paper and stuff like that? How can we model this to figure out how can we make it better or cheaper or whatever? But it's a modeling. If we were in the military, which I did for, they invited me down because they liked something I did. They wouldn't tell me what it was. But they wanted to know if I would work on sonar. And I go, well, yeah, that's kind of defensive. I don't got weapons. I said right away. So don't invite me if you want a weapon. But if you want to improve your sonar, I'd be interested. And that sounds interesting. I'd like to know if a torpedo was coming at me too.
Yeah, that'd be helpful.
Yeah, I'll be helpful, and so they liked my HD1s, it turns out. I don't even know if I'm supposed to say that, but it's been a long time that I was able to solve and get, with two different transducers and something that could do an image, we call an impulse, so a pure click without any artifacts. And I have a patent on that HD1. And I did it. HD1, I did kind of like a puzzle. In other words, you in a patent, you have to swear that, first of all, it's unique. And it's a federal thing you're signing. It's a federal offense if you're lying, you get caught, and that someone on the planet could make this. That you haven't made it so obscure that no one can make this. So you have to have somebody that could build this thing and duplicate the patent. Otherwise, and if you swear that you've done that, you're under perjury, a penalty of felony, federal felony, which means the federal government comes after you, not the state or Berkeley or something. It's serious. So I made it with a puzzle. I had quotes from Olson in there, and I referenced the book, and I used all different kinds of little things. So someone would have to read everything in order to build the HD1, which no one ever did because it's way too much work. And they had like 150 PhD scientists down when it got down there, and they wanted to improve their sonar with, instead of just having one transducer, more transducers. But the real problem what was really interesting to me is that I hounded Bill Labs. They were making a chip early on in the company in the 80s to be a spectrum analyzer. But they weren't going to do phase because they didn't think it mattered for the telephone. They thought we were all phase deaf based on Helmholtz, which is not even true. Helmholtz never said we were phase deaf. He said that there's certain experiments you could do where we don't seem to be able to tell. One of them was like you put a bunch of organ pipes up in the room, and you can change those so that you can get different wave shapes, but they all sound the same. So, and that would mean that we're not sensitive to phase in that dimension. And we've done the experiment with 5 speakers. You put different tones into them, and then you can put the same 5 tones into a speaker and it sounds the same. So we duplicated it, but he said he didn't have the tools to do music, which is much more complicated because now you have with tones, these tones have run when the universe started and they're going to end when the universe ends. So the tones are what we call steady state. They just always exist. So Om is when the Zen say, there's no time when you do Om because Om has been going on forever. So It's when the universe starts, Om is, and so you can't tell if you're in a room like a cathedral or something like that. If a bunch of monks are doing Om, you could not tell where you were in if your eyes were closed. But as soon as they hit a drum, then you hear the echo. Then you know, oh wow, this is interesting. So the problem with music is the fact it starts and stops. You got drums, you got hits, and so the whole chant in Om is to start with. I want to record this in one of those fancy caves in India, where you start out with Om for like 30 seconds or a minute, however long they can last, and then they start hitting their little things. You can start to tell we're in a room, and we can hear a room. So that's that whole Zen thing. That the idea is that it's a steady state universe, but we can, since we have free will, you can change it.
Yeah.
That's what I want to know. Kind of like you have been developing. I think you developed your first speaker or something in high school or something, and then you've had this unbelievable set of experiences as you built your company. You met your wife in Berkeley. You guys built the company together, and all this. I'm just curious, what has been kind of the biggest, I guess, challenge for you, or the biggest, the most fun challenge someone has brought to you to think about solving? Because I would think, like, for me as an experienced guy, it might be very different for you as an engineer. I mean, clearly one of the things I love about you, John, is that you're not a sales guy, because you would have been selling those speakers a lot earlier, or if someone came to you with cinema, you would have figured out a way to do it, right? And you are there for the industry, clearly. Like, it's clearly important to you to move your industry forward. Yes, to be successful in Meyer Sound as an individual, but also to be good for the world in terms of the industry. But I'm just curious, has someone come to you with some sort of request for your help where you're like, wow, this is incredible, or this is something I can't wait to work on? And you mentioned something like, I know you work with Inaritu and you've done the Blacken stuff and sonar and whatever, but I'm just curious if there's one that stands out that you remember in terms of your career.
I think what really fascinates me is how sound carries feeling and emotion, and and what is it? And I worry about it because experiments that people do, they take out. We think it's vibrato and different things like that. We're worried that a lot of people don't seem to understand this, so they kind of rip it out of the technology. They kind of like think they can compress it and things like that, and you lose this dimension of. And we've done experiments where we take out all, like in music, if you take out all the vibrato, I mean things when they're pushing on the string or vocal and things like that, it gets very flat and dull. And I don't think our industry. One of the things that I think is really important is our industry that's doing things understands that we should be really careful that we don't throw with a quest of digital and its insanity of things that we can do with it that we never was able to do with analog. We don't throw away the baby with the wash because we're trying to and I think that's why records and things are coming back, because they carry the information, feeling, and things like that.
Yeah.
And it often gets lost in compression and things like that. Well, why we have all the storage we could ever think of? Why would we want to compress anything anymore? It's not the '60s. We're not trying to. Why do people think
Right.
because it's like, if we don't, I mean, people I've seen. I'll give you an example. Last example, like when we're listening, someone was doing some archive recordings with Jerry Garcia, and I did some research with the hospital to see if some of things like cerebral palsy and things like, could we figure that out with sound and record it and see if we could analyze that with doctors that hear it. So, but it's another expensive machine, hard to do. But what was interesting is I was listening to these recordings that they were doing from the 70s, and I could hear vibrato. This kind of, his voice had this kind of like cerebral palsy. I said, I knew this is impossible. They said, what did you do? He said, I used a low noise subtractor. I said, can we listen to it without the low noise subtractor? And it was gone. And so we could artificially, with good intention, by trying to clean things up, wreck it. And I think we got to get people to listen on really good equipment and pay attention that digital is kind of can be. We couldn't do that in the analog world. What we can do in the digital world, we couldn't just replace all the notes. It's kind of like digital. It's like, okay, we got a blue sky, so we only need one pitch.
Yeah.
Like that. So it's like you can't apply that technology here because vision doesn't have that same problem. I mean, they have problems, but they don't have this. So I think that's kind of what I'd like to end on. Kind of.
That's fascinating.
Thank you, John. I mean, you're spectacular is the only word I could use here. I first of all, I'm astonished at how much you have going on up here. Right? I mean, there's a lot going on, and you know how to tell us about it, which is another. Kenny said you were a great storyteller, which you clearly are. Because that's how people communicate too. It's in the story itself. Has its own brand of music. And the other thing that impressed
me from lemons to bagels.
Yeah, well, that was the other side of it, man. We're dealing with salmonella, lemons, bagels, and by the way, being a New Yorker personally, I agree with you completely on those bagels, 1,000%.
Yeah, no, it was shocking when I tasted one. I mean, I thought we had good bagels. We do have good bagels in California. They're just not like New York.
No. And by the way, if next time you're in New York, get a chance on 35th, between 7th and 8th, is a company called Best Bagels and Coffee. Go buy their bagels. They are
okay.
They're off the charts, incredible. We can leave us all with that. Okay. So
now I want a bagel.
All right, me too. But thank you, John. Thank you for being here. It was
thanks for inviting me,
John. Thank you for everything. It was wonderful to spend time with you as always, and continued success. Say hi to the Meyer Sound family, and I miss you guys. And thank you again for sharing your knowledge with our listeners.
Well, thank you.
Yeah.
Have
All right,
a
John.
Good night, John.
Okay.
Bye.
Good night.
Amazing. Just friggin' amazing. Look, I mean, we literally went 20, 30 minutes over our norm, right? Just because it was so good. And I don't think first of all, that career, the life he's had is just astonishing at not just at the knowledge he has, but at the scale, scope, and range, even more so the range of things he's actually done. I thought we were going to be talking about the music industry, things like that, but we ended up talking about NASA and medical,
sonar and
sonar.
yeah, and those are only like I've been lucky enough to hear quite a few other stories. I mean, when you start in high school with a and then you create this career where you have like true impact in the industry. Like if you're not in the sound industry, you probably don't know Meyer Sound, you don't know John Meyer, but if you are even tangentially involved, you're going to become aware of them very quickly because they have such an impact. And the other thing is they are such a good centered company, right? You can see they're doing the right things. They make the right decisions.
Yep.
They know who they are and they stand for that, and they know who they aren't, right? And there's, as you can see with his decision, like we're not going to go into cinema. Not all decisions are kind of economically probably what would be recommended, but they're the right thing to do.
Yeah.
It's a Ray Charles, like he embodies this Ray Charles quote, which I love, which is, I never wanted to be famous. I just wanted to be great. Right. And that's how I think John lives his life.
And he managed to achieve it.
Yeah. And right. And has managed to achieve it. It's just kudos to him.
Yes.
So,
well, I guess we're now
like
kind of
going to go listen to some music or something.
I'm gonna all I know is I'm not gonna get salmonella now, right? So
that's right.
I guess it will be seeing people in a month. We have no idea who the guest is going to be yet, but we will let you know as soon as we do. And once again, awesome. So you ready to go home?
Yep, I'm ready.
All right.
All right, we're gonna use that plane again or no?
Yeah, why not? It's
fast. I mean, I think we get it to the end of the day. So
yeah. So no cost to us.
Yeah.
All right, man.
All right.
See you soon.
All right, Paul. Good to see you as always.
I'll take us out.
Okay.
This has been a Players Productions Network digital broadcast. This